Episode 103 of the podcast. In the first part, we're going to start talking a little bit about how we can get owners on board. In the second part, we're going to talk a little bit about old school type training methods and how to be kind to other groomers who are using older methods that are no longer recommended. You're listening to the Creating Great Grooming Dogs podcast. I'm Chrissy Newmeyer-Smith. I'm a certified professional groomer, a certified behavior consultant for canines, a certified professional dog trainer, and the owner of Happy Critters in Nashua, New Hampshire. And this, my friends and colleagues, is the podcast where grooming and training meet. This past weekend, I was talking at the Wisconsin Pet Stylist Invitational, which was a really good time. I loved speaking at conferences, by the way. So, guys, I'm throwing that out there. I really think those are fun. Online, in person, when we do in person again, that'll be fun. I'd like to get to talk to some dog training conferences because trainers need to know this stuff too. Anyway, my topic wasn't necessarily about the dog training part. My topic was, but my owners won't. The owner side of difficult dogs. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that because I think that the thing I hear most from groomers is that they don't have time to do it. I don't have time to add training to this, or I don't want to add training to this. Like this, there's no purpose for this. Like dogs should just come to me being good. My owners aren't going to pay extra because their dog was crazy. My owners won't. You know. In fact, I found some people who aren't even interested in listening to the podcast because they're like, "This is a ridiculous waste of my time." All right, I get it. So let's talk a little bit about that. First step is we're going to stop owner shaming and blaming. Let's just stop that for now, okay? It happens a lot, and it's really easy to say, oh my God, these owners, right? But we need to educate our owners because owners don't know what we need. Owners don't know what's normal, right? I cannot tell you how often owners will watch a dog being groomed who's really, really good, and they're like, oh, look how good that dog is being. Yeah, that's what most dogs are like. Most of the dogs we groom are pretty good. And with a little bit of work, most dogs can learn to be pretty good if they're not already, right? So owners don't get that. They don't know what normal looks like. And also, owners don't know that safety is a factor. And I want you to really think about that because safety is a huge factor in our behavior problems that we have. Because behavior problems are when dogs get hurt, people get hurt, and equipment gets broken. So I want to drive that into everyone's head. I think I try to say it in almost every episode. But behavior problems are when dogs get hurt, people get hurt, and equipment gets broken. So if we let them know there's a safety factor, let them know that their dog is not yet functioning at a normal level, and that there's a solution. But what keeps groomers from working on behavior problems? And some of those things are some myths. And one of those myths is that dogs will eventually get used to it. And I just don't find that to be an effective use of our time. While it is true that some dogs will eventually get used to it, if they've hated it the entire time, what happens is that later when they're old and they're frail and they have some health problems, now we're unable to use the same kind of restraints and techniques we were using before to push them through it, right? That's an animal who now is older and frail, and that level of stress can be a huge problem. And a lot of groomers end up turning dogs away as dogs get older. And how often do we hear stories about, well, it's time to send him to the vet for the vet to groom him, and if we can help a dog become comfortable and cooperative, the other thing that I say over and over and over again, but if we're helping them become comfortable and cooperative, then we can also work on helping them be good in the future. Because if they're not afraid of it later when they're older and frail, right, the fear isn't a factor. It might be discomfort and it might be things that we have to modify and work around, but it's not fear. And I want you to think about that because so many of us are like, well, the dog will eventually get used to it. And I used to be that person, right? Another myth that many groomers are still kind of clinging to. They needed to learn this as a puppy, and it's just too late now. Now, puppies, yeah, it's a great time in their life for them to learn lots of stuff, to not pick up on a bad habit, to think from the very beginning, from the very get-go, that like, oh, this is just life, right? Puppies are primed for learning. But that doesn't mean that a dog later in life isn't going to be able to learn that. And especially right now where so many people are getting their dogs through rescues. So up in New England, you have two choices. It's either a breeder or a rescue, and a lot of the rescues are coming from other parts of the country because New England did a really good job of getting people to spay and neuter their pets. So generally, we don't have an unwanted puppy problem up here. We're importing dogs from other parts of the world. It's crazy. But we're seeing a lot of dogs for the first time for grooming that are maybe 4 years old, 5 years old, 10, 12, right? We have no idea what their background is. And we should be thinking about the fact that, hey, we can still spend time teaching this dog about grooming. It's not too late, right? So they needed to learn it as a puppy and it's too late now is definitely a myth. We can start teaching at any time. At any time. So here's another myth. I don't have time. And this one is another groomer myth where we're thinking like, I don't have time. I don't have time to add training. I don't have time to add behavior stuff. I don't have time to work around this problem. I don't have time. But I propose to you, my fellow groomers, you don't have time to ignore behavior because that's the time suck. To spend the same amount of time fighting a dog, groom after groom after groom after groom, with no progress in sight ever, is a tremendous waste of time. And it's a safety problem for the dog, for you, broken equipment, frustration, stress. And I'll tell you, if that dog gets hurt, those owners are going to throw you under the bus. It doesn't matter that they've worked with you for years. They're going to say, I don't know, he's been getting groomed his whole life. And I don't know how this could have happened. Like, well, because your dog bites at things, like we need to work on behavior. You don't have time not to. To work on the same dog with the same problem year after year after year after year is a tremendous waste of time. It drives me a little bit crazy. Like, I've left jobs because that's what they expected me to do. I'm like, please let me work on this. Like, okay, no, then no, because it's a huge waste of time. Now, another myth that I hear groomers saying, and that is that the owners won't work with us. But that comes down to we have to tell owners what we need, why we need it, and why they need it. Why do you, as an owner, need your dog to be good for grooming? Right? Why? That's kind of interesting, isn't it? Well, because your dog is going to need professional level care throughout its lifetime. Now, whether or not they're having a groomer groom their dog, if they're grooming it at home, they're still needing grooming. They're still needing nail trims and brushing and handling. They're still going to need to go to the vet. They're still going to need all of these things, and we can help make that happen. So when they say owners won't work with us, I think it's because they don't know what we're trying to help them with. And so here are some owner myths. And these ones are things for you to think about too. Owners come in with their own baggage with their dog and their owner myths. And one of those myths is that dogs hate grooming. Of course he hates grooming. I mean, he's a dog and dogs hate grooming. Who told you that? Right? And this is from years and years of talking to owners and really fleshing out what their issues are, right? Yeah, a lot of owners think dogs simply hate grooming. Well, yeah. I mean, the poor guy. Like, plenty of dogs are fine. So you start showing them, like, well, look at this video of this dog being fined for it, and this dog being fined for it, and this is what I want for your dog. Because this shouldn't be stressful. It's a haircut. It's a bath. I'm going to massage him with warm soap. It's not a big deal, right? But they think that dogs hate grooming. We can address that. And because I'm a house call groomer, it's not like they have other dogs to observe, so I'll show them video. And sometimes I'll show them video of their own dog if they weren't in there watching and point out, like, look how good he's being for this part. And he wasn't last time. We need to tell them there's some progress, right? Here's another owner myth. Man, this one, I hear it all the time, right? Like dogs just don't like their nail trims. Dogs hate having nails trimmed. The poor thing, you know? Who told you that? Who told you that? When dogs understand how they're going to be held for nails, usually it's the holding for nails that they freak out about, not even the nail trim. But even if they just have very, very sensitive toes, like there are lots of ways that we can teach a dog to be fine for nail trims. Who told you they hate nail trimming? You know, and I'll show video to my customers of like a 2-minute nail trim with one of my guys. I have another video that was just taking the grinder, just grinding nails, which from my point of view as a groomer and as a trainer and as a behavior consultant, I will figure out which version a dog likes best. Is it nail trimming? Is it the grinder? Do they like their paws held in front of them? Do they like their paws lifted up from behind, almost like picking up horse hooves? What do they find comfortable? And I will work around whatever method they like and what they find comfortable and build on that, build on those successes. But to say that dogs don't like nail trimming is a myth. It's a myth. Some dogs might not like it. Some dogs might not have been taught to like it yet. And here is another owner myth that we really have to pinpoint, make sure that we're addressing, because the other myth is that that's just what groomers do all day. Well, of course, I mean, he fought you. Oh, wow. How do you handle that all day long? Well, we don't. We don't handle it all day long. Your dog is an anomaly. This is not what we do all day. I'm not here to get scratched up. I'm not here to get bit. I'm not here to wrestle your dog down. It shouldn't take 4 people to do a nail trim. That's not a service I'm going to offer. But they think that that's what dog grooming is. And we need to tell them, oh, heck no, that is not what dog grooming is. If you're enjoying this podcast, please remember to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes, and tell all of your friends. I want to talk a little bit about extending kindness to people. We're working with pets, and therefore we're working with the people who love them. Now, that can be their owner, that can be fellow dog professionals, that could be the vet, that could be their dog walker, that could be another groomer. But we need to start thinking in terms of helping other people understand and educating others. So I talked about the last part, educating owners and understanding some of those myths, but we need to also help them feel like we're there to help them. I want my owners to be helped. I want groomers to be helped. And I try to present things in this podcast in a very non-judgmental way. I'm not here to tell anybody like, that's stupid, you know. And I'll tell you, one of the discussions I was involved with this weekend was someone was asking a question about a groomer she observed hit a dog. Right. And there were lots of calls about how, well, you know what, you need to report that person, or you should do this, or you should do that, or you should tell the owners, or you should document, you should all these other things. But what I found was no one was really talking about, like, how do we modernize that groomer? Right? Like, nobody's working with dogs so they can hit dogs. Right? Like, wait, let's backtrack a little bit. Hitting a dog is not okay. But let's take a look and see what's going on there. What's happening? What happened? Why did it happen? Right? Because there are lots of things that could be happening. And perhaps this is a groomer who would, with new information, embrace new ways of doing things. So as someone who's been working with dogs for a long time and did not always do things the way I do today, in the 80s, when I started working with dogs, in 86, working at a boarding kennel and like doing brusher bather stuff and training classes and stuff. I mean, I was able to be around a lot of it. We were still using the dominance roll, alpha rolls. We were still using choke collars and prong collars. And certainly that's not the way I train right now. But if you had told me then that I was being cruel or mean, I would have bucked against that because certainly I wasn't. I'm here to teach this dog, right? So to get into the mindset of somebody who's doing things differently, and to help them update, right? We don't need to be harsh on an animal to teach them. And when we're talking about something like cooperative care, veterinary care, grooming care, things like that, our goal isn't in line with the goal of making them stop. I'm always trying to be in the build a behavior mindset, a reinforcement mindset, like let's build what we do want and help them achieve what we want them to be doing and help them be calm, comfortable, and cooperative. And a couple ways that we can express that to a groomer who's a little bit more old school, who may have been applying a punishment exactly as they were taught in the 80s, right? Like when the dog does this, a quick pop on the nose and tell him no, right? And maybe it has worked for her. Maybe all those dogs have stopped the moment they got the bop on the nose, right? Because that's the other thing too. When we say somebody hit a dog, that can be very subjective. I'm not saying it's okay. Please do not interpret this as Chrissy says it's okay to hit dogs if it's just a bop on the head. No, it's not what I'm saying at all. But to step back and say, what was the groomer trying to accomplish? Was this groomer angry? That is not okay. If you're just angry and you smack a dog, that's straight up abuse, right? If the dog is struggling and you're trying to apply a technique that you learned in the 80s or 90s, right? And it has worked for you before, and you figure if you do it again, this dog will settle down, right? We can change that. We can change that. That's a groomer who is trying to train, and we can say, hey, here are some other ways to train. Like we don't do that anymore. That's not considered okay anymore. And I will say there was a time when that was, I don't know if I should word it as considered okay, but pretty standard practice. And take that in for a minute, because I think some of us have an entirely different range of experience. So if you're new to the industry in like the past 10 years, that seems very foreign to you. Like, whoa, my God, I wouldn't dream of hitting someone's dog, right? Like, no, that's not what I do. I don't dish out reprimands to someone else's dog any more than I'd spank someone's kid. And half of you are like, spanking kids? What the heck, right? Half of us are like already like, whoa, there's a lot of hitting in this episode. But I want you to think that for some of us who've been in the industry longer, a lot of these things have been going on for a long time, right? And it is not fun. If you have to get frustrated with a dog to get anything done, yeah, that's not fun. That's not fun. You're going to hit the wall. You're going to burn out. You're going to get frustrated. You're going to get angry. You're going to really resent the customers who keep bringing these dogs back in and the dog's still not trained because the owners don't know what to do, right? So the solution set has to include groomers who are doing things in a way that we aren't approving of. Okay, give them the benefit of the doubt, right? Help them see a better way of doing it by inspiring them to try something else. Inspire people to try something else. And that's how it works out, right? We want people to try something that, well, let's teach them to be comfortable with it. Did you know that that's possible? Again, we talked about some of those owner myths and groomer myths. Like, wait, we can teach them to think it's okay? Yeah. Yep. Modern behavioral science is constantly changing, which is awesome. Because 5 years from now, I'm going to listen to this particular episode and be like, oh my God, we know so much more than we knew then, right? We can help these dogs be good. We can help teach them that it's safe. We can help build trust. We can teach our owners what we need to do so that we're not trying to get a perfect trim and pushing dogs past what they can handle to get a trim perfect. Because quite simply, that's where dogs have frustration and fear, is being pushed into doing something that they're not comfortable doing. So more pushing them through it is not going to help. Like, that is the bad experience. That's what they're afraid of. Oh my God, they're just relentless. They're just going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, right? If we talk to each other as professionals and say, hey, there is a way to teach dogs to be good for this. right? We can teach them that's okay. We can build some trust. I would love, love, love for owners to go around and every place they went with their dog with a behavior problem, they hear the same types of things. Well, your dog has a bit of a behavior problem, so we didn't complete the grooming today. We got through this part and we worked on this. What do you mean you didn't finish the groom? I'm never coming back here again. And to find out that every single groomer does it the same way. You know why? Because it's safe. Teach your dog. And if you don't want the groomer spending time teaching your dog, then pull up your little adult panties and you go teach your own dog, right? But we don't have to put up with the behavior problem over and over and over again because we're not going to be pushed into doing perfect trims on dogs who are having a hard time. And the dogs are having a hard time, not giving us a hard time. And that's a mind shift. For a lot of us who were grooming in the dark ages, back in the 1900s, right? That was a mind shift for me. I know for me it was a mind shift. Like, wait, he's having a hard time. He's not giving me a hard time, right? He's having a hard time. And that mind shift comes along with its own, like, how can I help him have a better time? It's total flip-flop. So if we start thinking about helping the dogs have a better time, talking to owners, not being pushed into doing the same things over and over and over again that make that dog have a worse time. We don't need to. And I know it's really hard when we're new at this to like give up a little bit of that control, let a dog go home half groomed or do partial grooming. Like, okay, well, we did his bath today. We're not going to use the dryer. Bring him back next week. We're going to do his nails. We're going to try some light trimming. Right? To split it up. And that can be really hard if you haven't seen the results of that pan out yet. But once you do, and you're like, you know what? This works. Why have I been doing it the hard way all along? It works. So it can be really hard to just go on faith. Like, okay, all right, there are lots of people in our industry telling me that if I'm patient with the dogs and if I split up the groomings and I help work on keeping them calm, that I can teach this dog to be good for me. And in the future, we can do a perfect groom. And there are a lot of people in our industry telling me that, and I'm going to go ahead and give it a try. You know, and it's a little bit of a leap of faith, and you might only do it with one customer first. But imagine again, the groomer who was observed giving a dog a smack, hitting a dog. Imagine them making that shift. Instead of being reported, instead of being told they're abusive, instead teaching. Like, and I know as somebody who's been in the business for a long time, it can be really hard to learn something new. You know, go ahead and help them be a better groomer. It's just good for everybody. It's good for the dogs. It's good for us. You know, it's just better for everybody. So we have to remember to be kind to each other, right? Like we should have the same kind of patience level with people with a behavior problem that we have with dogs with a behavior problem. Like, so if you think about it, like, okay, this groomer has a behavior problem in a grooming context. What do we do about it? But I want you to be thinking, like, you know what, before we just jump on the train of this person's abusive, find out what they were doing. Because old school training was a lot more about like, give them a scruff shake, a bop on the nose. There are veterinarians still doing that. Bam, no. Telling their owners to do it with puppies who are grabby. You know, like, so be thinking about that some of these techniques are still in use, not because someone is being abusive or angry or taking out their rage on a dog, but because they're following through on a training technique that we no longer recommend. And that's very different than someone who's just being blindly abusive. So if we are not going to recommend that training technique, we also have to tell them about the replacement technique. There are lots of other techniques to use. So it's not just about don't hit. It's about, and let's try this or this or this or this or this, because there are so many things we can try. So anyway, have a great week and stay curious. If you'd like more information, you can find me at Chrissy@happycritters.net, happycrittersdogtraining.com, or you can join the Facebook group Creating Great Grooming Dogs podcast or the Facebook page, Creating Great Grooming Dogs. I really look forward to hearing from you.